The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was getting ready for work. Sarah's phone rang just as she was spreading jam on her toast, and I watched her face transform from sleepy contentment to shock, then to something I couldn't quite identify. When she hung up, she sat in silence for what felt like an eternity, staring at the kitchen table we'd bought together at IKEA 3 years ago, the one we'd assembled with much laughter and only minor arguments about which piece went where. "My father's dead," she said finally, her voice flat and distant. "Heart attack. Last night." I dropped my coffee mug, and it shattered across our worn linoleum floor. The sound seemed to snap Sarah back to the present, and suddenly she was sobbing in my arms, her body shaking against mine. We'd been married for 5 years, and I'd never seen her cry like this, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere primal and unreachable. Sarah's relationship with her father had always been complicated. Robert Morrison was a successful businessman who'd built a small empire in commercial real estate, but he'd been largely absent during Sarah's childhood. He'd missed dance recitals, school plays, and graduations, always claiming that business came first. When we'd gotten married, he'd attended the ceremony but left immediately after the reception, citing an important meeting. Sarah had pretended. It didn't hurt, but I'd seen the pain in her eyes as she watched other fathers dancing with their daughters. The funeral was a grand affair. Hundreds of people I'd never seen before, all claiming to be close friends or business associates. Sarah moved through it like a ghost, accepting condolences with a polite smile that never quite reached her eyes. I stayed close, holding her hand, whispering reassurances, trying to be the anchor she needed in the storm of grief and overwhelming attention from her father's wealthy circle. It was after the funeral, when we were back in our small 2-bedroom apartment, that the lawyer called. Mr. Henderson had been Robert's attorney for decades, and his voice carried the weight of years and important secrets. He needed to meet with Sarah to discuss the will, he said. Could she come to his office Thursday morning? I offered to come with her, but she shook her head. "This is something I need to do alone," she said, and I respected that. Sarah had always been independent, one of the things that had drawn me to her when we'd met in college. She was studying business while I was getting my teaching degree, and even then, she'd had a clarity of purpose that I'd admired and envied. Thursday evening, she came home different. Not visibly, she looked the same, moved the same, spoke in the same voice, but something fundamental had shifted. She sat across from me at our kitchen table, the same spot where she'd received the news of her father's death just 5 days earlier and told me about the inheritance, $5 million. The number hung in the air between us like a physical presence. Our combined annual income was barely $60,000. I taught high school English, and Sarah worked as a marketing coordinator for a small nonprofit. We lived paycheck to paycheck, splitting groceries and utilities, celebrating when we had enough left over for a movie or dinner out. $5 million was more money than we'd ever dreamed of having. "There are conditions," Sarah said, her voice carefully controlled. "The money is held in trust. I can access it, but only for specific purposes. Real estate investments, starting a business, education. And there's something else." She paused, looking down at her hands. "If I'm divorced, within the next 5 years, the money goes to charity." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Why would that matter?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Sarah looked up at me then, and I saw something in her eyes that I'd never seen before. Calculation. "It doesn't," she said quickly. "I just wanted you to know all the details." But in the days that followed, I began to notice changes, small things at first. Sarah spending hours on her laptop, researching investment opportunities, talking to financial advisors. She started dressing differently, buying expensive clothes that she claimed were investments in her professional image. She joined exclusive clubs and attended networking events in circles we'd never moved in before. The conversations at dinner changed, too. Instead of talking about our days, our students, and co-workers, our plans for weekend hikes or movie nights, Sarah began discussing market trends and business opportunities. She spoke about people I'd never heard of as if they were old friends, wealthy investors and successful entrepreneurs she'd met through her father's connections. "You could do something too," she said one evening, looking up from a stack of financial documents. "With this kind of money, you could go back to school, get your PhD, maybe write that novel you're always talking about." The way she said it made me feel small, like a charity case she was considering helping. "I like teaching," I said. "I'm not unhappy with my life." "But you could be so much more," she insisted, and I realized that somewhere in the space of 3 weeks, I had become insufficient. Not just my income or my career prospects, but me. The person she'd fallen in love with and married was no longer enough. That night, lying in bed beside her, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if this was how it started. Not with a fight or betrayal, but with one person simply outgrowing the other. The inheritance had given Sarah possibilities she'd never had before, and I was beginning to understand that I might not be part of those possibilities. The changes began subtly, like the first drops of rain before a storm. Sarah started waking up earlier, spending her mornings reading financial newspapers and making calls to investment advisors. She'd always been organized, but now she approached her day with military precision, scheduling every moment as if time itself was a commodity to be maximized. "I'm meeting with a business mentor today," she announced one morning, adjusting the collar of a blazer I'd never seen before. "Patricia Morrison, no relation. She's built 3 companies from the ground up. She's interested in helping me explore opportunities." I looked up from grading papers at our kitchen table. "That sounds great. What kind of opportunities?" Sarah paused, coffee mug halfway to her lips. "Various things, real estate development, maybe tech investments. She thinks I have potential." The way she said potential suggested that potential was something I lacked. These mentor meetings became regular occurrences. Sarah would come home energized, talking about market disruptions and scalable business models, using jargon that felt like a foreign language. She'd always been smart, smarter than me if I'm being honest. But now her intelligence felt weaponized, focused on objectives I couldn't fully understand. "You should meet Patricia," Sarah said one evening. "She's having a dinner party next Friday. It would be good networking for both of us." The dinner party was in a penthouse apartment overlooking the city, filled with people who spoke casually about their second homes and recent trips to Europe. I stood in the corner, nursing a glass of wine that probably cost more than our monthly grocery budget, watching Sarah work the room with a confidence I'd never seen before. "And this is my husband, David," she'd say when introducing me, and somehow the word husband sounded like an apology. "He's a teacher." The word teacher landed with the weight of a confession, something slightly embarrassing that needed to be acknowledged and quickly moved past. I watched her laugh at jokes I couldn't hear, her hand touching the arms of men. In expensive suits as she made points about market opportunities. She looked beautiful. She'd always been beautiful, but now she looked like she belonged in this world of marble countertops and casual wealth. I, on the other hand, felt like an imposter in my best shirt and tie, acutely aware that my shoes were scuffed and my watch was a wedding gift from her parents rather than something I'd chosen myself. "Your wife is remarkable," Patricia told me during a brief moment when Sarah was across the room. Patricia was in her 50s, perfectly put together, with the kind of confidence that comes from never having worried about money. "She has vision, real entrepreneurial instinct." "She's always been ambitious," I said, trying to match her enthusiasm. "Ambition is good," Patricia replied, "but it requires sacrifice. Sometimes we have to let go of things that no longer serve our growth." She smiled, but there was something sharp in her eyes. "I'm sure you understand." I did understand, perhaps better than Patricia realized. I was becoming one of those things that no longer served Sarah's growth. The distance between us widened week by week. Sarah started traveling, business trips to meet with potential partners, conferences in major cities, investment seminars that required weekend attendance. When she was home, she was distracted, always on her phone or laptop, managing what she now called her portfolio. "I found a property," she announced one evening, spreading photographs across our coffee table. "Downtown warehouse district. It's perfect for conversion into luxury condos." The numbers she quoted made my head spin. Purchase price, renovation costs, projected profits. It was more money than I'd ever imagined dealing with. And she discussed it as casually as we'd once talked about buying new curtains for the living room. "That's amazing," I said, trying to inject enthusiasm into my voice. "We're really going to do this?" Sarah looked up from the photos, and for a moment, I saw confusion in her eyes. "We?" she said. "David, you don't know anything about real estate development. This isn't really your area." The words hit me like a physical blow. When had we stopped being we? When had my lack of expertise in her new world become grounds for exclusion from our shared future? "I could learn," I offered. "I could take some courses, maybe." "It's not that simple," Sarah interrupted, not unkindly, but with the patience you'd show a child who didn't understand why they couldn't help with adult responsibilities. "This requires specialized knowledge, connections, experience. You'd be starting from zero." Starting from zero. That's what I'd become in her eyes. Not a partner, but a beginner who might slow down her progress. I thought about the 5 years we'd spent building a life together, the dreams we'd shared, the plans we'd made for our future. Had all of that been erased by a number in a bank account? That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through our apartment, looking at the photos on the walls, the books we'd collected together, the small mementos of our shared life. Everything looked the same, but it felt different now, temporary, like a set that was about to be struck after the final performance. In the morning, Sarah was already dressed and ready to leave when I emerged from the bedroom. "I'm having lunch with some investors," she said, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. "Don't wait up tonight. We might go to that new place downtown afterward." "Sarah," I said, and something in my voice made her turn around. "Are we okay? Are we still okay?" She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw a flicker of the woman I'd married, uncertain, vulnerable, seeking connection. But then it was gone, replaced by the composed professional she'd become. "Of course we're okay," she said, but she didn't kiss me goodbye before she left. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I went through Sarah's desk. I told myself I was looking for bills or documents we needed, but I was really looking for answers. What I found were business plans, investment portfolios, and a notebook filled with her handwriting. On one page, she'd made a list titled 5-Year Goals: buy property, start investment firm, establish market presence, build network. At the bottom of the page, almost as an afterthought, she'd written, reassess personal relationships. Reassess personal relationships. I was an item on a to-do list, something to be evaluated for efficiency and return on investment. The conversation I'd been dreading came on a Saturday morning in late November. Sarah had been quieter than usual all week, taking calls in the bedroom and spending long hours at her laptop with a frown of concentration that never quite disappeared. I was making breakfast when she emerged from the shower, dressed in clothes I didn't recognize. A crisp, white blouse and tailored pants that looked expensive and professional. "We need to talk," she said, settling across from me at our kitchen table. The same table where she'd learned of her father's death, where we'd discussed the inheritance, where we'd shared thousands of meals during our 5 years together. Now, it felt like neutral territory for a negotiation I wasn't prepared for. I set down my coffee mug carefully, buying time. "Okay." Sarah took a breath, and I could see her organizing her thoughts the way she now organized everything. Methodically, efficiently, with clear objectives. "David, I've been thinking about our future, about what we both want and where we're heading." Where we're heading, I repeated. Together? She looked down at her hands, and for a moment I saw uncertainty flicker across her face, but when she looked up again, her expression was resolved. I don't think we want the same things anymore. The words hung between us like a diagnosis, terminal, final. What does that mean? It means I've changed, she said simply. The inheritance, yes, but also everything that came with it. The opportunities, the people I've met, the possibilities I can see now. I'm not the same person you married. People change, I said. That doesn't mean— It does, though, Sarah interrupted, and her voice was gentle but firm. David, look at us honestly. Really look. We're living completely different lives now. You come home and grade papers and watch Netflix. I'm building a business, making investments, planning for a future that's bigger than anything we imagined. When we got married, I felt something cold spreading through my chest. So this is about money. It's not about the money itself, she said quickly. It's about what the money represents. Freedom, choice, the ability to become who I'm supposed to be. She paused, studying my face. And the truth is, I don't think you want to become that person with me. She was right, and we both knew it. I'd watched her transformation over the past 6 months with growing unease, feeling like I was losing. Her to a world I didn't understand and wasn't sure I wanted to join. The dinner parties, the business trips, the constant focus on growth and opportunity, it felt hollow to me, despite the obvious benefits it brought. What if I tried harder? I asked, hating the desperate edge in my voice. What if I took some business courses, tried to understand your world better? Sarah's expression softened, and for a moment I glimpsed the woman I'd fallen in love with in college. Kind, thoughtful, genuinely concerned about my feelings. You'd be miserable, she said quietly, and eventually you'd resent me for it. We both know you're not built for this kind of life. What kind of life? Success? Ambition? No, she said. Ruthlessness. Competition. The constant need to optimize everything, including relationships. She gestured around our small apartment. You like this life, David. You like teaching. You like our quiet evenings. You like the simplicity of what we had. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not what I want anymore. I stared at her. This woman I'd promised to love in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer. So that's it? You've decided you're too good for me now? That's not— She started, then stopped herself. Yes, maybe that is what I'm saying. Not that I'm better than you, but that I need different things now. I need a partner who can match my ambition, who understands the world I'm moving into. Someone with money. Someone with drive, she corrected. Someone who won't hold me back. The accusation stung because it contained a grain of truth. I had been skeptical of her transformation, worried about the person she was becoming. I'd questioned whether all the networking and investment talk was really making her happy, whether the expensive clothes and exclusive events were filling the hole her father's death had left behind. The divorce papers are already drawn up, she continued, pulling a folder from her purse. I've been fair, more than fair. You can keep the apartment, and there's a settlement that should give you some financial security while you figure out what you want to do next. I opened the folder with trembling hands. The numbers were generous, more money than I'd ever had at once, enough to pay off my student loans and buy a car and still have savings left over. It was a good settlement, the kind that said she didn't hate me, just didn't need me anymore. There's one thing, she said, and I looked up from the papers. The trust has a clause about divorce. If we split up within 5 years of the inheritance, I lose everything. It all goes to charity. I blinked at her. You're giving up $5 million? Yes, to leave me. To be free, she said, and the word carried weight I'd never heard from her before. David, I realized something these past few months. Having money isn't just about what you can buy. It's about what you can become. And I can't become that person while I'm married to someone who doesn't believe in the journey. I set the papers down, my hands shaking slightly. "You've really thought this through." "For months," she admitted. "I kept hoping you'd want to change with me, that you'd get excited about the possibilities. But you never did. You looked at my new life like it was something distasteful, something that was changing me in ways you didn't like." She was right. Again. I had looked at her transformation that way, had mourned the loss of the simpler woman I'd married. But sitting there, looking at the divorce papers and the woman across from me, I realized something else. She was also mourning a loss. The loss of the life we'd built together, the future we'd planned before inheritance changed everything. "Will you be happy?" I asked finally. Sarah's composure cracked slightly, and I saw tears in her eyes for the first time since her father's funeral. "I think so," she said. "I hope so. I know I won't be happy if I stay in a life that feels too small for who I'm becoming." I signed the papers that afternoon. Not because I agreed with her reasoning, but because I understood it. Sarah had been given a glimpse of a different life, one with more possibilities and fewer constraints, and she'd decided it was worth sacrificing everything else to pursue it. 3 months later, I heard through mutual friends that she'd started her own investment firm and was dating a venture capitalist she'd met at one of Patricia's dinner parties. By all accounts, she was successful and seemed genuinely happy in her new life. I kept the apartment and went back to teaching with a strange sense of relief. The settlement money sat in my bank account, mostly untouched, a reminder of what I'd been offered and chosen to refuse. Sometimes I wondered if I'd made the right choice, if I should have tried harder to become the person Sarah needed me to be. But most days, grading papers at our old kitchen table, I felt grateful for the clarity her departure had brought. She'd been right about one thing. We'd wanted different lives, and sometimes love isn't enough to bridge that gap. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them go, even when it breaks your heart. The inheritance had given Sarah the freedom to choose who she wanted to become. In the end, it had given me the same gift.